I'd say with real estate, you probably experience a lot more agents who treat their commission as their paycheck.
Yeah.
Because they've not been told it's not, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so they're paying for all these marketing expenses and advertising and coaching and continuing education and MLS fees. A lot of them are paying it out of their personal accounts because to them, the commission is a paycheck. And so that's, something that even on discovery calls, I'm able to kind of educate and say, like, I understand this mentality because I had it. And this is how much more clarity you're going to have if we treat this like a business.
Yeah.
And if you're treating it like a business at this level can afford this rate.
Hey, and welcome to the Ambitious Bookkeeper podcast. I'm Serena Shoup. I am a CPA and mom of 3, and I'm running a virtual bookkeeping business mostly from my home. You're in the right place if you're a bookkeeper, accountant, or an accounting student, and you know that your purpose is bigger than sitting in a cubicle. If you're ready to learn some actionable tips and strategies to help you start and grow a bookkeeping or accounting business, I hope you stick around. Welcome back to the Ambitious Bookkeeper podcast. I'm your host, Serena Shoup. This is part of our niche series. As part of this series spanning July and August, you'll be listening in on interviews with niche bookkeepers and accountants. I thought it would be really inspirational and super valuable to bring on bookkeepers and accountants who have built niche firms to take you behind the curtain of what it looks like to get to the point of serving in a specific niche. My hope is that you'll gain the inspiration and information that will help you hone in on your niche, or if you already have one, find different ways to help your clients. I'll be asking some similar questions of each of our guests, like what their minimum fee is, how they got into their niche, and what their firm team structure looks like. I'm super excited to bring this to you, and I hope that you enjoy. If you're ready to hone in on your own niche and build a bookkeeping business that gives you the life that you want, check out the Bookkeeping Business Accelerator by going to ambitiousbookkeeper.com/BBA. The link is also in the show notes. If finding a perfect fit client is something that you've needed, check out my mini course, The Bookkeeping Client Closer. Go to ambitiousbookkeeper.com/closer. All the links will be in the show notes. Now let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to our niche series here on the Ambitious Bookkeeper podcast. Today I have another guest, Kelly. Welcome, Kelly. I'm so excited to have you. I've been following you on social media for a while. So I feel like I know you really well, but would you like to introduce yourself, who you help, and how you got here?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Serena. I'm excited to get to chat with you today. My name is Kelly Wigington. I am the owner of Summer Dove Bookkeeping, and my firm specializes in real estate bookkeeping. Primarily, we work with real estate agents, but a lot of agents are also investors. So we have some real estate investor clients as well. And because I started out without a niche, I still serve several clients who don't fit into that category, who are some of my beloveds. So I may not ever get rid of them, but they're all service-based at this point. And it took a little while to get to where I knew that this is who I wanted to work with. I've been in business for about 2 years, I guess 2.5 now. I started right at the beginning of 2021 after kind of accidentally picking up a friend as a client. Mm-hmm. And that kind of snowballed in 2021 when he just kind of suggested, hey, I think other people would like your help with this too. So I like to say that I accidentally became an entrepreneur because that was not on my radar at all. I just like helping people. I have an accounting background. I was doing the bookkeeping for my church. And I feel like I just kind of tripped and fell into this and have just loved learning how to do it along the way.
Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners might resonate with that, like accidentally becoming an entrepreneur. I mean, there's like the camp where some of us knew maybe from a young age we wanted to be entrepreneurs because we grew up in a home of entrepreneurs or a family, but later got an accounting degree. And then you have the other camp that got their accounting degree and always intended to like work in corporate or at a Big Four or an accounting firm. And then something like this happened. So which camp were you in?
So when I was I was a senior in in college. So I was in my 4th year. I interviewed with Ernst & Young and left that interview like, this is not it. I did not. I hope that it was as bad as I thought it was, because I don't want the Big Four or bust life. I don't want the 70-hour tax week life. Like, I just knew that I wanted to have a family and that I am not a hustle person. Like, that's not really my vibe. And so when I graduated, I had kind of written off using the accounting degree at all. I was like, well, this is a good thing to have in my back pocket. I went into the mortgage industry, actually. And then when I got married and had to relocate, I landed at a job at a preschool, which is really random, but it was like just something to do while I, quote, looked for another job, and I got a real estate license and sold real estate for a while, which is why that's kind of become my niche. A lot of my network around here was realtors from my little stint of selling real estate. But as soon as I could be a stay-at-home mom, I jumped on that. And I got to be home full-time for a year before I picked up a part-time bookkeeping job at my church. And that was mostly to just get out of the house, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love hearing how people got into like where they're at. And so did you start out college wanting to be in accounting and doing the Big Four thing, or?
I didn't really know. I knew that I wanted to do something in the finance accounting world just because math was kind of my thing. And all of my parents and several of my family members were engineers, and I wasn't excited about engineering either. So this seemed like the next best numbers thing to do. I went to an engineering school, which is kind of random, but got an accounting.
Like, I'm going to compromise with you, parents. I'll go to an engineering school, but I'm going to go for something else.
That was kind of what happened.
Oh, that's too funny.
But yeah, so I wasn't entirely sure. And then when I took my first accounting class, I was like, well, this is it. I like this. But again, once I realized what all that entailed after you graduated and like what it required to get a CPA. And I was in a little, like, I guess, aside there, as I was an out-of-state student. And so when I needed a 5th year to get my CPA, my mom basically said, you can either come home and do it in state, or you can pay for it yourself. And I was like, well, nope, just going to go work.
Yeah.
Find a job.
Yeah. I feel like maybe it's not I'm sure it's talked about enough now, but back then, like probably around the time you and I were graduating college, I don't even know when you graduated. I'm assuming it was around the same time as me, but maybe I'm older. So no one really ever said like, you can actually just do your 5th year at community college taking art classes if you've already fulfilled all your accounting requirements, which most degree plans do set you up for having fulfilled all the accounting requirements. It's just, you need more credit hours. So that's what I did. I just enrolled in a community college and took like Excel classes and art classes.
Yeah. I feel like there wasn't a lot of conversation about options. It felt like this one track, like you get your accounting degree and then you obviously get a master's, whether it's a MAC or an MBA, and then you go sit for the CPA, and then you go for the Big Four. And that seemed like the only thing people talked about. It didn't even occur to me that there were like other accounting jobs that weren't just like go to a big tax firm.
There's so much more out there. And it's crazy. I think it really depends on the school that you go to accounting for, how they push that. I feel like they probably want to see a high, like they want to be able to tout like our placement rate at a Big Four is this. But I went to a small university and we didn't even have a Big Four firm in our area. It was all local firms, and the instructors in our accounting programs were local firm owners. Like, depending on where you went to school, I think that has a lot to do with it. But Yeah, there's so much out there. And I remember in corporate, I think he started out in my AP department and then he was kind of like moving into junior accounting, but he was working on his accounting degree. And he was like, yeah, when I graduate, I'm going to go work for, CBiz, which is a regional firm in San Diego. And he's like, or I want to work, at one of the big four. And I was like, no, you don't. Like, if you've been working here and you like having the flexibility that you currently have, you are going to hate it. I was like, there's so many better options out there. I was like, you could literally work for me in my accounting department at this company and have a way better life and probably make the same amount of money.
Yeah. I don't think it occurred to me that there were like other ways that I could use my degree until that job opened up at my church. And it just kind of hit me like, well, this isn't a high paying job, but like, this is what I went to school for to an extent. And oddly enough, like the one qualifying thing that I had that none of the other applicants had was that I had used QuickBooks before, but I had only used QuickBooks because I was the finance vice president of my sorority. And I was like, I could have gotten that experience without the accounting degree.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I still had to go to college to be in the sorority, but still.
Yeah. That's
but I like pointing that out to people. Now I get to be an advisor for that sorority here at the local chapter of it. And nobody wants to be finance vice president. And I like to stand up and tell the girls like, hey, like this landed me a job and now I own a business literally because of this position here in the sorority. So
that's super important to be able to like show that other people that there's a different path, which is honestly like why we're having this podcast as well, of like there's so many different ways to get your business to where you want it or get your life or your career where you want it. And it's not always the mainstream way. So you touched briefly earlier on how you got into the real estate niche because you had the experience. And that's one of the things that I teach a lot of, like when people are like, what kind of businesses should I help? And I'm like, always start with like what lights you up and, or if you have experience in that industry, just as a start. It doesn't mean you have to stay there. But so from the very beginning though, did you have any real estate clients or like, what was your initial client base like?
We'll be back after a quick break.
This episode of the Ambitious Bookkeeper podcast is sponsored by my brand new free training, The Ultimate Guide to Creating a Profitable Bookkeeping Business. In just 1 hour, you will learn 3 keys to creating and launching a profitable bookkeeping business. We will map out your path to creating a bookkeeping or accounting business that keeps you in control of your time, priorities, and expertise. From someone who built a 6-figure firm on part-time hours. That's right. You can stay in control of your time, keep family as your priority, and serve your clients well. It just takes a little strategy up front, and I'm going to help you with that during this free training. So head over to the show notes to sign up now for the next training and find out how you can choose the work you do, kick imposter syndrome to the curb, use tech to be super efficient, which all leads to a profitable business. Just head on over to ambitiousbookkeeper.com/training, and I will see you there.
Actually, no. Most of my first clients were not real estate agents. And kind of the funny thing is when I was a real estate agent, bookkeeping wasn't really on my radar, except for the sake of like home budget. Like my husband was like, how much are you spending on this? And so I kept a spreadsheet, but it wasn't until I filed my taxes that first time that I was like, oh, I'm so glad I was tracking this. Even with the accounting degree, like this feels so embarrassing to say, but in the real estate world, that's not something that's talked about.
No.
They tell you to like track your mileage for whatever reason. That's a huge deal when you get started. Just like make sure you track your mileage. And otherwise, all of the training and education is like the legality side for transactions when you're selling homes, and then marketing. All the education opportunities that I had were about marketing and sales. And I can't say that I retained very much of it. That's still not my strong suit in my business now.
Well, your business has grown, so I wouldn't discount that.
Right. But I guess I didn't ever realize that I could have benefited from a bookkeeper or from having my financials in the type of condition that I now keep my clients in until like looking at it backwards. Like in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I wish I would have known what I know now, because I would have made a lot of different decisions and I would have understood what my bottom line actually was, how well I was actually doing. And so because of that experience, I feel like now I'm able to educate on, social media and in my network. Hey, this isn't something that real estate agents often talk about, but it is extremely necessary, especially if you're considering investing or growing a team or getting your broker's license and opening your own agency. This is an extremely important part of running this real estate business, is understanding you run a business, that you're not an employee of your brokerage. And I think that's a connection I didn't make when I was doing it. And so now I feel like I've really been able to help some of my clients understand where they stand in their business.
Yeah. So that brings me to a question of, are you using that as a marketing tool to go speak to groups of real estate agents, or are you going to networking events and doing a spiel about it? I'm very curious, because it seems like a really great opportunity for growing your business and just growing the overall awareness in that industry.
Yeah. So that's been one of my goals for this year, is to get some of those lined up. I will, for the first time this fall, have all 3 of my kids in school. So I haven't been able to do a lot of in-person anything since I've started my business. My youngest is 4. So he was itty bitty when I first got started. And then the niche is relatively new. So I guess about a year and a half ago, I released a little digital product. It's very similar to others that are floating around out there, but to be able to track your books in a spreadsheet that's pre-formatted for you. And as I was building it, I was like, this is what I could have used. So that was kind of what inspired me to do it. This is what I would have liked to see when I was a real estate agent. And at first I was kind of marketing it to everybody, but that's also become something to give away to real estate agents, or give them a low cost way of getting started on tracking their finances. And so I've used that as kind of a springboard in some ways to kind of say, hey, this is something you need to be doing, and it's not hard to do. And here's how you can get started, and here's how I can help you when you're ready for that.
Definitely. Even if you can't do anything in person, a lot of what I try to tell people is do whatever you can virtually. Honestly, you'll have a wider reach than an in-person event, for one, but go on podcasts, go guest teach in programs that are teaching other real estate professionals, maybe even other topics, do a bonus in there. Maybe their course or program is about marketing, right? And you could be like, hey, I'd love to offer this bonus training that I have specific to real estate agents on getting their finances in order and da 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 da. And you already have connections in the industry. So yeah, most of what I've done in that realm is also in the virtual capacity for the same reasons. It's hard to travel. I have little ones. I have a very sporadic schedule. And it's yeah, there's plenty of opportunities to do virtual things like that to build your authority. So yeah.
Absolutely. It's a great idea, for sure.
Yeah. So we talked about how you got into your niche. One of the other things I want to make sure I cover on all of these niche podcasts is how many clients are you currently supporting in and outside of your niche? Because I think it matters for the holistic picture. Because you did say there are a few clients that are not in the niche, which I also want to highlight, that is 100% okay when people are well, I have to fire all these clients or let these clients go or not accept other clients that aren't in the niche. No, it's just going to make your marketing efforts a lot easier to be targeting one specific industry or niche. And if the actual process of doing the bookkeeping isn't that different, which it shouldn't be if you're working with other just service providers, then it's not really going to put too much of a wrench in your process either. But so all that to say, how many clients are you currently supporting?
Currently, I have 22 clients.
Okay. So the second question, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I was going to answer your second question. About 12 of those are in the real estate industry.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And that many clients, I have to assume you have some sort of team member helping you. So do you want to elaborate on what your team looks like?
Yeah. So you were a little bit of inspiration on when to hire. I will say that because on paper, it didn't make sense probably to hire when I did. But again, my youngest was 2 when I started this. So as soon as I felt like, I don't even remember how many clients I had, but it probably wasn't more than 6 or 7. I hired a part-time contractor. And since then, she has since moved on to not even doing accounting. She's doing something completely different, which is great. But I now have a part-time employed assistant and 4 contract bookkeepers. All of them are working for me as like their side job. All of them are either full-time moms or work full-time somewhere else. And so they don't work a ton of hours, which is why I have such quantity. But I feel like that helps me to spread things out. Like each of them handle a certain number of clients. And if one of them is letting me know like, hey, this is too much, it's not hard to shift one client to another contractor. Or, take it on myself while I find somebody else to take it on. So anyways, that setup has worked really well for me so far. And learning to that's probably been like the trickiest part of learning to run a business is learning how to run a team.
Yeah.
Especially since I don't have any real corporate experience. And when I was a real estate agent, I was just, I was an independent contractor. And so that's been probably the biggest learning experience for me so far.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can identify with that. And kudos for just going out there and doing it, even though you might have been a little hesitant to like lead a team. But like the upside is that you are providing extra income or a job to all of these women, I'm assuming. And
I've got one man on my team.
Okay, women and men, people. And like that's number 1. And number 2 is like you are setting your business up to where like you are not the one having to deliver everything to the clients, and you have the capacity to be able to take on one of the clients if needed and to help with the transition. And that's really important too, because if your team is at capacity and you're at capacity, then if something happens, then everything falls on you right? And that could be a lot. So, but yeah, that is definitely one of the more challenging aspects of running a business is learning how to run a team. But would you like to like share one of the things that have been like the biggest game changer or resources that you've used to get better at leading your team? Like anything for our listener who might be like, I want to hire, but I'm like scared AF.
Yeah. So the first contractor I ever took on approached me, which I thought was interesting. She found me on social media and she, expressed interest in just like wanting to learn how to do it. So and offered, she was like, I'll be cheap labor. And I still have a couple of my like very first clients have really, really simple books. And so that was a good segue into me, like being able to like learn how to train a contractor and like talk to a contractor and like navigate those waters before I started actually building. So I'm sure you weren't fishing for a plug, but working with Mariah was a huge game changer for me.
I honestly, I was like, I feel like you've done leadership calls with Mariah, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Oh yeah. Her leadership blueprint was huge because I just didn't, aside from that one contractor, I had no idea where to start as far as like finding the contractors myself, finding the team myself, or identifying like what a company culture is, or like how often am I supposed to talk to them? How often are we supposed to, because one of the weird things about like this type of business is we have all these clients that don't really have anything to do with each other. So none of my contractors actually have to collaborate. They could exist without ever knowing the others existed. But I really wanted to create a team culture where people could ask for help, people could pass off tasks, which is something that doesn't really happen very often. And I didn't necessarily want to like cultivate friendships, but I did want to create an easygoing culture where nobody felt like they were worried about their, their performance or what was happening with our business. And so Mariah gave me some tips there on just like keeping the team involved with one another without them necessarily having to collaborate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a big one that comes up when I'm working with mentoring other bookkeepers and accountants is like, number one, a lot of people wait till they're so slammed to hire that they cannot dedicate the amount of effort and time and be methodical and really consider who they're hiring. They're just so desperate that they end up hiring quote unquote bad hires, but it's not necessarily the hire that's bad, the employee or the contractor. It's that they're so behind and strapped for time that they can't properly cultivate the culture and cultivate the training and properly onboard. So that person is not set up for success. So one of the things I want to point out to the listener is that you mentioned you hired way early on, which I did the same thing. And you're able to really work out some kinks on like your hiring process and also just like your internal process with the clients so that it's a lot easier to onboard the second and third employee once you've done the first. So if you have, and you're able to have more time figuring out like, okay, what is it exactly that I want that person to do? And how am I going to train them? And I'm not stressed out with time because I still have capacity. And that's the biggest thing. Like you still had some capacity probably to take on a few clients on your own. But if you had done that and then waited to hire, then you wouldn't have had the capacity to train.
Right. Well, and I think without the corporate experience, I'm going to blame it on corporate experience, but it might just have been some imposter syndrome. I wasn't sure what expectations to put on anyone because I've never led a team before and I didn't really know what it's supposed to look like. And then communicating those expectations became tricky for me because I've never been one to volunteer for a leadership role because I don't want to be the one managing expectations typically. But turns out that's what you have to do when you own a business. So I will say that like my second hire was actually a VA that I found on Upwork. And like, she and I got along fantastically, but I had not figured out what I really wanted out of her. And so, I mean, we spent several months together that felt really disconnected. And like you said, it wasn't because she was doing anything wrong or there was anything wrong with her or that I was doing anything wrong. I just didn't know how to effectively communicate what it is that I needed her to be doing.
Yeah.
And so I felt like the second time around after working with Mariah and just kind of being able to write down, what do I want this to look like? What is my vision for all of this? What is the mission of my business that I want these employees or contractors to support? Like I had never thought of that before. I just was like, well, I just need help.
Need these tasks done, right?
Yeah, I just need tasks done, but you have to identify what they are. So another game changer in my business was also the kickoff with a sauna. I did that a long time ago. I'm like
writing down, okay, I got to link that. We will link it, all the resources in the show notes, by the way.
Yeah. Once I had the contractor, I had to be able to give her tasks, but then it wasn't until I had that assistant, because I mean, the bookkeeping tasks are kind of the same across the board. You do bookkeeping tasks, and even though your workflow might be different than mine, they're all probably about the same as far as like monthly tasks go. Like those were pretty easy to say, here's what we do every month for every single client. Here's your list. But when it came to an assistant, it was like, man, these tasks are all over the board and they need to be organized somehow. Yeah. So learning to navigate my workflow software was a huge deal when it came to passing off those tasks. But then my second time around, when I hired my W-2 employee, that just went so much better than the first time, because I had a plan in place. I had a list of expectations. I had my workflows in place, and she's she's been fantastic at identifying more places where I needed some organization help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's when you know you have a rock star too, when they're not afraid. And you honestly have to set that tone as well, right? You have to set the tone of like, please don't be afraid to tell me that like this needs to be improved. But just know if you bring that to my attention, it's probably going to get put on your plate to fix it, right? Like,
Yeah.
But that's when you know you have a rock star. So if someone's willing to do that, when you have that conversation, it's like, yes, that's who.
Yes. And as an example, because this has recently happened, when I first brought her on, and she's not an accountant, I was just kind of showing her the ropes and what we do and why we do it. And one of the questions she asked me was, okay, so what do you do to make sure all these people who are paying you this rate should still be paying you this rate? Like, are you looking at their accounts? Do you decide that every month? Like, I stopped and was so embarrassed because I was just like, I don't know. It just feels like they're not paying me enough, I guess. I wait till I get resentful and then I tell them they're getting a price increase. So she actually helped me implement these like scope reviews and created tasks for all of my current clients in all of their projects to do biannual scope reviews to determine whether or not they've fallen out of their scope. And even if they haven't, whether our prices still match theirs. And then we kind of collaborate and evaluate whether or not that's a client we're going to choose to do that with. But that's not something I had even, I guess I had thought about it, but I hadn't encountered that situation quite yet. Right. Beyond obvious scope changes, like when an investor client bought a new property, to me, obviously that required a price increase. But when it came to like clients whose businesses had just grown, like they're just growing and their transactions went up, then it hadn't occurred to me that I was getting to do anything with that until she asked that question. So yes, to the rockstar employee, that is definitely a game changer. Yeah.
And like just always having not always, but having a fresh set of eyes on things like that to bring up those questions is super valuable. So sometimes we get so far in the weeds. And then also, if you're not the one working on all those clients,
right,
you may not even realize that they've grown to that extent or the volume has increased. And so implementing a communication checkpoint with the team that's working on those clients to be like, please keep an eye on this. Like what we do is we paste our scope of work into the overview of the Asana project for all of the clients. So anyone on the team can go and look and see if this client asks for something, is this within the scope? And everyone knows how much each client pays us from that too, as well. So I'm huge on transparency. I know maybe other people wouldn't run their firm that way, but if I want my team to work toward the goals that I have as well, like, and be bought in, they need to know more of what's going on, if that makes sense. So empowering them to see, like, is this in scope? Can I say no to this? Or like, you don't want them to assume to just like do everything for the client, because that gets out of hand too.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
All right. So you're building a team. You have some great pieces of advice. So thank you for that. As far as your pricing, as we're kind of talking about scope and pricing, do you charge then a flat fee for all of your clients?
I have kind of a base fee at this point, and it covers a certain number of transactions and reconciliations. And I actually do very nerdy. I do all my pricing in a spreadsheet that is built out for me to put in, an estimated number of transactions, number of bank and credit card accounts that need to be reconciled. We also reconcile a lot of mortgage and escrow accounts for investors. So those are, it's like each of those have a certain cost associated with them. And so the base is $350, and that pretty much covers 2 bank or credit card accounts and up to 50 transactions. And so as those numbers increase, so does the price. Yeah.
I like that. I like hearing the way that different people price things. And this is where I say, like, I have a pretty good feeling on price, and the way that I've set my pricing up, I know works for me and my niche and the software that I use. But that's like it's been years of getting to that point of being able to say with confidence, like, yep, if you're at this level in business, like this is the price, this is what is included. And it just makes it so much easier and you can be more objective in your pricing. So another plug for figuring out a niche.
Yeah, it is helpful because it took me a long time to narrow down the pricing. And because I was working in lots of different industries, I had several very small startup clients. I still have them. And so I offered quarterly bookkeeping for a while, and that was a much lower price point. I did that to have an opportunity for new startups, or like, again, with the real estate agents. When I was a real estate agent, I wouldn't have been able to afford me now, but I probably could have afforded that quarterly rate. So that was why I offered it for a while. At this point, we've just grown to the size where it doesn't make sense financially to take the quarterlies, which is another reason that digital product is something that I've been trying to push. But the fact that they're all in, now that we're marketing directly to real estate agents, and I should say specifically, we try to work with real estate agents who are making about 200,000 in commission or more, which translates to like 7 million in sales in the real estate garb or the real estate verbiage. Because I don't know if you follow any agents, they talk about how many millions in sales they have. And they're referring to the price point of the properties, not how much.
Yeah, it's a vanity metric.
It's a very different metric. But that is, a language that I know how to speak. So, but at that rate, at that level, I'm able to say, like, at this level, you should be able to afford my services if you are budgeting other things well. And if you don't know if you can afford my services, well, here's where we need to start.
Yeah.
Because I do see, and I know this is this way in a lot of industries. In a lot of industries, business owners don't have a handle on where their money is going. But I'd say with real estate, you probably experience a lot more agents who treat their commission as their paycheck.
Yeah.
Because they've not been told it's not, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so they're paying for all these marketing expenses and advertising and coaching and continuing education and MLS fees. A lot of them are paying it out of their personal accounts because to them, the commission is a paycheck. And so that's, something that even on discovery calls, I'm able to kind of educate and say, like, I understand this mentality because I had it. And this is how much more clarity you're going to have if we treat this like a business.
Yeah.
And if you're treating it like a business at this level can afford this rate.
Yeah. I think that's a really important piece because a lot of times I'll work with people on their pricing and they'll be like, well, I want to make this amount every year. And then I have the conversation of, okay, well, how much time do you want to spend on that? And how many clients do you want to support? And then it comes out to being like this monthly fee that they have to get to that they're like, my clients aren't going to pay that. And it's like, well, you might need to target a different audience then because it all has to come into alignment. You can't be like, I only want to have 10 clients, but I only want to support startups because they can't afford it.
Right.
Okay. So I feel like we've pretty much tackled all of the questions that I have. So you're like 2+ years in business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you went back to year one, like when you started, and I don't even know, I'm not 100% sure on your journey. Like when you started, did you enroll in a course? Did you try to bootstrap things and figure out everything on your own? Let me know.
I enrolled in a course and it's not one that I'll name drop because I've since found probably 6 more I would have rather taken, but it did get me started. So
yeah,
I can't complain too much.
Yeah, there's value in that too, right? It's like, I'm sure it fast tracked some of what you needed to have fast tracked. So if you can swing it, like, yeah, I think that's always a good, at least look into what the options are. And there's plenty of options these days. But if you had a piece of advice for someone like that back then in your shoes, or if you had to start over again, now you know which course you would have taken. But other than that, do you have a piece of advice for someone just starting out that's like, I know I want to do this. I just don't really, I don't know where to begin, or I'm struggling with like some mindset stuff, what would you say?
I guess my biggest piece of advice would be to write everything down as you go, or at least record it. Like Loom's my favorite thing ever. I just record myself doing all kinds of crap at this point because it's easier than writing it down. But when you have 1 or 2 clients, it's so easy to just do it all by memory. Like it all lives in your brain and it feels like that's fine. And you might even be able to teach one person how to do those couple sets of books. But if you have a client roster of 2, just plan on having one of 10 and treat it like that.
Yeah.
Plan on having one of 20 and treat it like that. And so even if it feels silly or overkill to document and have, a client roster with different information on it, like it takes forever to go back and do it when you do have 5, 6, 7 clients and you're growing and you're training someone and you're like, I don't have any of this written down. That's a struggle.
Yeah. One thing I've been practicing a lot lately, and this goes for life too, is to take the steps that like you would take if you were already like at that point. So for instance, with this, it's like, even if you maybe don't envision having a huge book of business, even if you just envision having 10 and you only have 1 or 0 right now, take the actions that someone at 10 clients or 20 would be doing and like take that step. So maybe you don't have any clients yet, like still sign up for Asana, it's free, or whatever workflow system, and set up what you think the workflow is going to look like bare bones, base level, so that you're inviting that client in to your world, basically. Like you're setting up your system so that when that client comes to you, you're ready. And it just kind of like signals the universe or whatever, like you're ready.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Even I think that one of the hardest things to get in place once I had so many clients was my onboarding process. I just had been kind of a hodgepodge of like, okay, now we need to sign this. And now I need this from you. And now I need this from you. And it took like having Asana set up and also working with that first virtual assistant. That was the first time anybody else had asked, like, what do I need to do to onboard this person? And I had to stop in my tracks and be like, I don't really know what the order is here. I've just been kind of winging it.
Yeah.
So now I have like a legit onboarding process. A lot of it is automated. I feel really good about it, but I mean, that didn't happen on the front end. And I feel like I probably would have avoided a lot of headache and kind of, I would say, like sloppy engagements if I had something just even written down, just an order of operations there.
Yeah. And the list of things that you're going to need from every client, even if you don't think that client has it, or they're not going to be one to give it to you, or like I've gotten that feedback from like other bookkeepers when I share my list of like, these are the things we ask every client for. They're like, why do you ask for 3 years of tax returns? And I'm like, because you never know, you might need it.
Yeah.
I want them in our file.
Yes.
I don't do taxes, but I want those in my file because inevitably when we're working with that client, there's going to be a piece of information on that tax return that we need to fill out some other piece of paperwork, or to, who knows, right? To figure out if their books are even tying out to their tax return. That's the number one reason. But yeah, and don't just assume your clients aren't going to be willing to give you bank access or be willing to give you their prior tax returns. Like they're willing to work with a bookkeeper. They should be willing to like open all of that up to you because you're going to need it at some point. But it's kind of funny, like just even having that list of things, like maybe not every client's going to have it, or you're not going to need it from every client, but just ask for all of it up front.
Right.
So is there a specific system or software that you use for onboarding besides Asana? You have your workflows in that, but what do you use for your like engagement letters and proposals and things like that?
I'm using Dubsado at this point.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, it took a while to build.
Yeah.
Because
did you DIY it or did you hire it out?
Another piece of advice for newbies starting out. When you start out, you do a lot of it yourself. And there will be a point where it makes sense to invest in things or invest in somebody else helping you do things. But when you're doing it alone, I guess as a piece of encouragement, like, don't get discouraged when you don't know how to do something, and like, just be aware that like a lot of learning happens when your tech stack grows.
Yeah.
Because I often joke that like, I don't have room to learn anymore.
I think that's a very common phrase that comes out of women, mothers, especially. I'm like, the brain fog is too heavy for that.
In 2 years, my tech stack went from like Gmail and QuickBooks Online to a list of like 9 softwares I have to onboard all of my contractors into. And then sometimes I step back and I'm like, is this too much? No, I need all of it.
Yeah.
I need every single bit of it. And it's going to take them a while to learn. And it just like, it took me a while to learn, but like, that's part of the process. And like, you're not behind if you're still like baby stepping through some new software that it seems like somebody else just threw down $6,000 to have somebody else set it up for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess that my encouragement is just like, that doesn't mean you're not doing it right.
Yeah. My other thing with like Dubsado too is like, you can look at other people's systems and it's like so perfectly, beautifully set up. But even if you just take the bare minimum of like the way that Dubsado is supposed to function as, at least this is how I started out with it, is I was like, the biggest pain point for me was getting the proposal, the engagement letter, and my first invoice paid. So that is the only thing I focused on. I was like, those are just the 3 forms that I need to set up and make sure that before I start working on a client, I get my paperwork signed and I get paid first. So it's like, and then you build out from there. You don't have to feel so overwhelmed about having like your intake form in there and some email automations and all that kind of stuff. Like, you can do the real basics in the system and then build it out as you go.
Right.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your experience. Where is the best place for people to connect with you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, I spend most of my time on Instagram at Summer Dove Bookkeeping. I'm also, everything goes over to Facebook, but I'm mostly on Instagram, and I'm also on LinkedIn here and there. Do you find LinkedIn intimidating? Because I certainly do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to be there more, and
honestly, too like not professional enough for LinkedIn some days.
I think it just depends on like who you follow on LinkedIn. I've definitely curated my feed now that feels a lot less professional and more like social media platform. There's hope. And for the listener, a while back, I did an interview with one of my clients, and we went deep into LinkedIn stuff. So we'll link that in the show notes as well. But basically, like, I don't stress about posting on LinkedIn. Like, if I'm inspired to post, I do. But for the most part, I just go on there and engage with other people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's what I can handle right now. So that's what I do. All right. Well, thank you again so much. Please, if you're listening, take a screenshot of this episode and tag me and Kelly, and we will see you or talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks so much, Serena. It was good to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who helps make this podcast possible. Content and interviews are produced by me, Serena Shoup. Our intro and outro music is written and performed by my brother, Ian Gilliam. Editing is also by Ian using his awesome sound engineering skills along with Descript software. Hosting and publishing is by Buzzsprout, and you can check out the show notes for links to all of these amazing resources and resources mentioned in the episode.
Embrace ambition.